Chapter 1. Children of Apocalypse. Souls. The echoes and moans of the lost souls that he had cut down during his time here. Good or evil. It didn't matter which side they were on, only that they were another person for him to kill because it was his job as the Grim Reaper. Izuku Midoriya was his name. A formerly quirkless boy who was always looked down by society and had a hard time growing up. He was kidnapped at the age 10 when he was left alone in the hospital room, a few years after he was determined quirkless. Name: Izuku Midoriya. Quirk: Fatal Touch. Embodiment: Death. He was a late bloomer, very late bloomer. He gained his quirk during his time in captivity, but it could have been dormant this entire time. Before finding out about his quirk status, he would have dreams of seeing dead people walking around or where he witnesses the death of the next person that is going to die. He didn't know what it was, but it always terrified him. He was always screaming in his sleep. It was bad. It was so bad to the point that his mother Inko had to sleep with him to make him feel safe. But the truth was, no matter what he did, he would always see them day in and day out as if it was one of his daily habits. Then let's add on to the bullying he had to endure. When he was told he was quirkless, he instantly shut down. He didn't hear his mom or the doctor in that room anymore. All he heard was that he couldn't be a hero. He didn't scream, he didn't whine or anything, he just sat there still as if he was frozen in time. His mother Inko blamed herself for not giving him a quirk and that he was going into a life of a quirkless human. Bullied, shunned, non-existent. All of that pained her too much. But instead of reacting to it and breaking down, he just sighed and accepted his fate. He never thought that he would be one of the 20% humans that were quirkless, but hey, life not's fair. He was more worried about his mother and how she took all of this. He didn't blame her for not giving a quirk. He didn't blame her for anything at all. His father, on the other hand, walked out on them. He wanted nothing to do with his son after he learned he was disabled. Izuku gritted his teeth in anger at the thought of his father. The bastard caused his mother so much pain and heartbreak. At the time he was just as hurt as he was when he left, but over time he just disregarded him from his life. The only family he had left was his mother. She mattered to him more than anything and he hated to see her cry. He always took care of her as she did with him. His father walking out took a toll on her a lot more than it did to him. Putting his father aside, his thoughts went straight to his mother Inko. He had so many moments that he loved the most, the time he spent with his mother. But now he can't even remember the last time he saw her. Out of everybody he met, she was the only one who told him that he could be a hero. Others shut him down, saying that it was too dangerous or that he couldn't be one. There's no room for quirkless to become heroes. But even with all the discouragement and insults, Inko was the only person that never gave up on him. Then came the day he was taken. He was taken from his mother and was experimented on for a project. He and 3 others were selected for some project called Project Apocalypse. They were trying to create their own 4 horsemen, then use them to take over Tokyo. A damn project that nearly ended up with them killing each other, but they were able to break out and kill their captors. But the sad part about was, they couldn't go back to their lives. They couldn't go back to their homes, the families they loved so much, because they were now killers. Not heroes. Not villains, and not vigilantes. Killers. Izuku sighed to himself as he laid his head back onto the soft grass field underneath him and just closed his eyes for a second. He was about to enjoy the nice long breeze of the cold air until... Hey, wake up. A voice called out to him. Izuku felt something nudge his shoulder with a rough object, but he ignored it and nearly turned his head over to resume his peaceful sleepy. Suddenly he felt someone turn him on his back and add weight to his stomach. Opening his eyes, he saw a girl with shoulder-length brown hair, big brown eyes and rosy cheeks. She had on a cloak over herself, but her legs were showing as she sat on top of him. Deku, she called out, poking his freckled cheek with her finger, causing the boy to open his eyes. Ochako-san, what is it? He asked, gazing into her eyes. Name: Ochako Uraraka. Quirk: Zero Gravity. Embodiment: Famine. We're out of food. Food or souls? He asked her. Real food, this time. She answered him. I don't have enough ingredients to make enough food for everyone but we're almost out of food so someone needs to make a run to the grocery store. Alright fine, I'll do it but later. He said waving his hand and tried to turn his head but Ochako stopped him and pulled his cheeks. Ow. You're going to do it now. Eri's gonna be up in a few minutes and I don't want her to start the day with an empty stomach. She said with a frown on her face. Okay, Izuku sighed as he sat up with Ochako still in his lap, facing her head on. Just make me a list, and I'll get it. Already did. She said holding up a small piece of paper. Really? He asked giving her a blank stare. A girl's gotta be ready for anything that may happen. She said winking at him. Besides, usually you would be on top of this since you're the most organized person out of everyone. She teased him making the latter grumble. I know. He said rolling his eyes playfully before grabbing the list from her hands and went over the list, eyes moving back and forth as descended the list before nodding his head. Okay, I got it. Thanks. She said giving him a kiss on the cheek. Make sure to get extra apples for Eri. Ochako stood up reminding him as she went back inside. Right. He replied as she closed the door behind her. Getting up he was wearing a black cloak like Ochako but his had some tears like he was representing the actual Grim Reaper covering his body and stopped at his feet. Stretching, he summoned his weapon and set it against his back, just in case he had to fight, or run into a morning snack. Time to go. He said to himself as he jumped off the roof of his building and onto another doing the same thing multiple times until he found a spot for him to descend from the rooftops and blend in. The brunette was on the couch in a living room with a small child in her arms. She had white hair, pale skin and a horn protruding from the side of her head. Ochako smiled as she softly brushed the child's bangs away from her face. She then started thinking back to her old life before they ended up like this. Her parents, she wonders how they are doing right now. Ochako Uraraka used to be a bubbly girl around others and would always have the brightest smiles to make anyone's day better. But ever since that night of the kidnapping, where she was taken away from her parents and became a potential subject for a stupid project, she doesn't really have those qualities about herself anymore. It all happened too fast. 1 second, she was with her parents saying goodnight and headed off to bed. And the next thing that happens is something piercing her neck and she instantly felt woozy. Later she finds herself waking up in a cell cuffed in chains. It was a horrible feeling, she was so confused and lost, wanting nothing more than to return home but could not no matter what she could try. Mama. Ochako was brought out of her thoughts as a little girl tugged onto her cloak. Looking down she was met with innocent bright red eyes gazing into her own. This was Eri. Name: Eri. Quirk: Rewind. Hi sweetie. The brunette softly smiled at the child whose was now wide awake. What's wrong? You were making that face again. Eri said as she gave Ochako a demonstration of her own blank stare to emphasize her point. Stare. Yeah, sorry. Ochako apologized. Why are you sad? Eri asked. I'm just reminiscing on my old life, before I was taken. She said as she turned her gaze to the TV before them seeing a hero take down some thugs from a robbery. Before I lost everything. What do you mean, you didn't lose everything? Eri said as she gave Ochako a sideways look. You have me, Papa, Auntie and Uncle. Ochako couldn't help but giggle at her sweet naive look. Eri didn't understand the meaning of losing something because the child never really had anything to lose. She was still new to the outside world and its cruel nature. Yes, you're right, I do have you and Papa. She said laying Eri on her back and started tickling the child's belly earning giggles. She's still small and innocent, and fragile. Very fragile. The brunette thought as she turned her attention to the TV. Thinking back to when she and Izuku found her, she was afraid of anyone that came close to her as if she was expecting to be taken or attacked. If she hadn't found her, she didn't even want to think about what had happened to the child in her arms. The only thing that matters right now is that she is safe with her and away from anything that could harm her. Mama. Eri called out, bringing the teen out of her thoughts once again. Are heroes bad? Eri asked her. Ochako raised an eyebrow at this. As far as she knows, Eri saw heroes saving people on TV. There was that one time with Endeavor, but other than that no one else. Heroes weren't necessarily good or bad, they were just people who dress in costumes to protect the weak from criminals. PFFT, yeah, that'll be the day. The strong will always strive on the weak, using them for their own means to fulfill their own selfish desires. They're not all that bad, sweetie. Ochako started, her tone sounding gentle. They're good people who want to protect the city from very bad people. What made you think that heroes were bad? Papa, he's always looking sad whenever he sees a hero on TV. She said, pointing to the TV. I thought heroes were bad because they made Papa sad. She added, making Ochako understand her statement. Izuku always wanted to be a hero like his idol, he wanted to save people like other heroes, but he couldn't. And then there was their time in the project where they broke his spirit by forcing him to kill others. It made her sad that he cannot save people as a hero anymore. I guess you could say that, Papa is still having a hard time adjusting to his new role in reality we live in. He doesn't hate heroes, it's just that he can't be one now because of him being a host to death and all. She explained as the child tilted her head. Ochako wasn't worried about Eri knowing about what happened to her and the others because the little girl had seen it all. She had seen people die as well, either from her quirk or when the Birdmen killed them. As for pain, she just accepted it. No crying, screaming or anything, she just took it because it was the only thing she could feel. Pain and emptiness were the only emotions she could feel until she met her Ochako and Izuku, who she refers to as her parents. They were the first people to give her affection. Eri saw them as family instantly because of the affection she received. It was a new feeling that was so warm and comfortable, different from the cold and empty feelings she had inside her. She loved it and never wanted to lose it, grabbing on, and never wanting to let go. But you and Papa are heroes, Eri exclaimed as she stared at her mother with a pout. Mama and Papa wouldn't be heroes if they haven't saved me, she declared, staring into the brunette's eyes challengingly. The brunette looked at her dazed for a second before softly giggling and wrapped a child in another embrace. You're right, I guess we wouldn't. Thank you, Eri, for cheering me up. And just for that you get to decide what we get to have dinner. Yay. Eri said, bouncing up and down in Oshako's arms. What's with all the racket? A voice called out from the other side of the room. Looking over, Ochako and Eri saw a teenage boy with spiky ash blonde hair and red eyes. He had a scowl on his face as he leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. Name: Katsuki Bakugo. Quirk: Explosion. Embodiment: War. Good morning, Kachan, did you have a good night's sleep? The brunette said, calling him by his nickname, making the latter's scowl deepened. Morning, uncle. Eri replied, waving happily at her uncle. I thought I told you not to call me that, round face. He sneered at Ochako before turning his gaze towards Eri, losing his scowl slightly. Morning, kid. Where's the FWA? He looked down at the child before rethinking his words. Where's Deku? Ochako inwardly smirked at the fact that Katsuki could not curse in front of Eri. As long as she was within range, he could not do his usual swearing because if he did, she would kill him, not Izuku, her. He's out making a quick run to the grocery store, she answered. By himself. Katsuki scoffed as Ochako nodded her head. Well, that's a stupid idea, why didn't you go with them? 1. It's a 5-minute walk from here to the market. 2. He's not going far, as long as he's within distance I can sense if or when he starts to panic. And 3. You were still sleeping, she said sternly as Katsuki turned his head away. Whatever, he muttered as he walked out of the living room to another. Eri giggled as he left. Uncle's funny and grumpy, she laughed. Yeah, he is, Ochako agreed. Katsuki's always angry, ribbit. A voice called from beside them as they saw a girl with frog-like features enter the room. It's just his personality, that's why I think he will never be a happy person. What was that frog face? Katsuki shouted, peering his head to gaze at the girl who only pointed at him with her finger. See? She said with a smile while the blonde left the room muttering a few incoherent words. Name: Tsuyu Asui. Quirk: Frog. Embodiment: Pestilence. Anti-Sue. Eri shouted as she jumped up from Oshako's lap into the Tsuyu's arms, the latter laughing as she caught her. And how are you doing, little Miss Tadpole? She asked, calling her by nickname. Eri giggled as the frog girl tickled her in her arms. Ochako smiled at them as the two started having a tickle war, so she decided to leave the room to them. She exited the family room and walked down the hallway where it had multiple empty door-shaped spaces where it led to other rooms. Besides the family room, there was the bathroom, the kitchen, dining hall that had a path to the living room and the laundry room. At the end of the hall there was the front door and a path of stairs leading upwards with two sets. Going down the hall she went upstairs and at the top of the last step she immediately turned right, entering the room located right next to the steps and closed the door behind her. Entering, she took off her cloak and set it aside on a chair before turning around to look in the mirror. Looking at herself she sighed sadly, seeing the scars on her arms, legs and stomach. Disregarding her image, she then opened her closet and picked out a pair of clothes to wear since she wasn't going anywhere out in the city. She put on a black tank top with a sports bra underneath and a pair of black shorts. Leaving the room and coming down the stairs, she was greeted with the sight of Izuku, who suddenly emerged in front of the stairs, mist surrounding his body. "I'm back with the groceries," he said, holding the bags full of food. Ochako gave him a slight glare before speaking. "You know we have a door, right?" She jerked her finger over to the wooden frame as Izuku smiled sheepishly. "Right, sorry about that." He apologized as Ochako descended from the stairs and shook her head at him, her glare gone and replaced with a smile. "Silly boy," she teased, poking his nose and walking past him. "Come on, help me set up." "Hi." He agreed as they walked to the kitchen, putting the groceries and preparing meals for the morning. Chapter 2, Hidden from the World. Detective Tsukauchi Naomasa was in his office at his desk in annoyance. He just got done arresting and putting away the villain that All Might had dropped off, and now he has 2 files sitting on his desk waiting to be read. "Psy Evil never sleeps," he said as he sat down and opened the first file. As he read the contents, he went over a few pictures first. He saw a photo of a mutilated body and a head severed with blood leaking, making the captain cringe in disgust. Setting the photo aside, he came onto another dead body. On this one was badly burnt and there was fire still licking the skin, leaving burnt flesh or what was left of it. He grimaced at the photo once again before setting it aside and looked through the rest of them. All of photos were gruel and gory, as most of them involved chopped heads, severed or crushed limbs, and gouged eyes. Honestly, this was too much. It wasn't a big deal until Naomasa looked up at the title of the case and the names of the people that were killed in these photos. One of them was a very particular name that he knew too well. The 8 Precepts of Death. Kaichisaki aka, Overhauled Status, Unknown. Hari Kurono aka, Chronostasis Status, Unknown. Rikia Katsukame. Status, Deceased Cod, Poisoned to Death. Shin Namoto. Status, Deceased Cod, Impaled by multiple concrete reinforcement bars. Kendo Rappa. Status, Deceased Cod, Blown to pieces, lower body remains left. Toya Setsuno. Status, Deceased Cod, Cut in half. Yu Hojo. Status, Deceased Cod, Decapitation. Sorimitsu Tabe. Status, Deceased Cod, Head blown off. Diodoro Sakari. Status, Deceased Cod, Burnt to death. Hekiji Tengai. Status, Deceased Cod, Severed arms and missing eyes. Naomasa was left in a state of shock at what he just read. 8 out of 10 violent criminals of the Yakuza were killed just like that. And the photos showed that the bodies were barely recognizable. It was like whoever fought them had a grudge or score to settle and gave them brutal deaths. The detective honestly felt a little sick to his stomach. He wondered that whoever killed them was related to this mess. Could it have been a gang war, or it was an operation gone wrong? There were too many variables in this. It wasn't until he realized that he looked up back at overhauls and chronostatus status, they were still missing. Well, not for long. Suddenly a scream echoed through the department and Naomasa rushed out of his office and into the main hall, his gun ready for who was here. What's wrong? What happened? He asked frantically. In the room all the cops around him were frozen in shock and horror as if they saw something so frightening. A female cop beside him shakily pointed towards the box at the door of the department. There's the box, you need to see the box, she said. Naomasa slowly nodded his head and walked over towards the box. It was a big box and inside was a cooler. Wait a minute, a cooler. Naomasa approached the said object and put away his gun before kneeling. He then reached his hands towards the handle of the cooler very slowly, sweat started dripping down his forehead. His hand gripped the handle and he let out a small gulp in anticipation. Grasping the handle, he then opened the cooler very fast, too fast, and out came a head rolling on the floor. The head stopped rolling onto the side and revealed the face. The mouth was wide open, and it had one eye missing while the other was blood red and had a huge hole in the middle of the forehead. Oh my god. Naomasa thought grimly as he heard a few detectives screamed at the sight of the head or others lose their lunches into trash bins. He was compelled to do the same, but he fought the urge and kept himself from doing so. He examined the facial features of the head and instantly realized who it was. That's Kai Chisaki, he thought before looking back into the box. He found a small note inside with blood all over it. He carefully picked up the note and turned it over, seeing words written in black. How do you like my gift? Sorry, but this poor bastard deserved it after everything he did. 2 more boxes of his body parts and that other masked freak are scattered within the police station, go ahead and find it. Oh, one more thing, expect to find the next box you receive with a video on it. Have fun. Well, that's one person I found, but where is his assistant? He asked until he saw another picture. P.S. Here's a preview of the other masked freak when you find him. Picking it up, he saw something and immediately paled at what was on it. He quickly ordered someone to pick up the boxes and take them to the coroner before running to the nearest trash bin, and lost his lunch. Whoever did this has a sick, twisted personality and was a serial psychopath. After breakfast, Ochako and Izuku were sitting on a couch in the living room with Eri and Katsuki on the floor, the latter holding the former in his lap as she played on a 3DS. He introduced the young girl to it when they were alone in the house one day and curiosity got the best of her. Unfortunately, he did not have any games that were non-violent, so before he let play the device he bought her Animal Crossing and let her figure out her way to play. He would never live that down thanks to round face, he would never admit it, but if pushed the wrong way, she could be scary as hell. Look! Eri shouted, bringing the blonde out of his thoughts. Turning to the child, he saw the image showing a little house with a few people celebrating around. I build a house. That's great, kid, he said, trying to find the right words to say. Mama. Papa. Look. Ah, you build a little house all by yourself. Ochako cooed at the child before pinching her cheeks. I'm so proud of you. Ah. Mama. Stop, no pinching. Eri whined, waving her hands at her mother's, trying to get the pinchers off her cheeks. I can't help it, you're so cute, Ochako said as she continued pinching the child. Katsuki just rolled his eyes before turning his head back to the TV while Izuku flipped through channels. Then something caught his attention. Deku, he called. Yeah. Go 2 channels back and turn up the volume, Katsuki said. Izuku did what he said and went back, the channel number being the news, and turned up the volume. We are live in Hosu City, where a team of pro heroes have taken down a slime villain and rescuing a number of citizens. The slime villain attempted to consume citizens and use their own quirks against the public, wreaking havoc. A slime villain, Izuku said. I wished I was there to see it, or if they have any live footage of the fight that would be great. Please don't, it's annoying enough that you already got us and all the other heroes you have in your book, Katsuki said with an irritated expression. Do you really need to add more? Yes, Kachan. He answered sternly. You never know what's going to happen against someone with a powerful quirk. You need to know their advantages, strengths, weaknesses, pretty much everything about their quirk. He explained. I was being sarcastic. Katsuki shot with a scowl. Then you should have said it was a rhetorical question. Izuku fired back, earning a giggle from Ochako, who was still occupied with Eri's cheeks, the latter pouting as she gave up on stopping her mother. Whatever, stupid Deku. The blonde said, returning his head to the screen. In other news, while that was going down, another incident took place as the hero Endeavor fought against a villain with a fire quirk. His fire was stronger than the number 2 heroes, but thanks to the intervention All Might, the number 1 and 2 heroes were able to beat him. The fight between these 2 heroes and villain reminded me of a similar incident that took place a few years back in Tokyo, where a rank villain Blaze. Click. All heads were confused as the TV suddenly turned off. Hey Deku. Turn the TV back on, will ya? Katsuki said in an annoyed tone, turning his head to look at Izuku only to see the latter leaving the room. Ochako stared at the spot Izuku was in earlier before letting go of Eri. Katsu, please watch Eri for a second. I'm going to go talk with Deku. She said to the hothead. Yeah. Just make sure Deku doesn't get all sappy and whatnot, it annoys me to no end when he's like that. He scoffed at the brunette, then turned his attention to Eri. Come on brat, show me what else you build on that game. The child ignored his temper at the sound of him wanting to see what else she created on her game brought excitement to her eyes, and she ran over to him before proceeding to show him her creations. The brunette silently thanked him for distracting Eri before leaving and went to find Izuku. She knew what was going through his head, and he could have another episode any minute. Out of everybody, when it came to mental breakdowns, Izuku had the worst. Katsuki was a best second. He barely had any episodes of his own, but because of his explosive temper and personality combined with being a bit of a battle freak, she assumed he was close. Then came her and Tsuyu. She walked up the steps and arrived at his room, which was right across from hers. Paused. Taking a small breath, she grasped the doorknob and turned the handle slowly, opening the door as creaking sound was heard. Deku. She called softly as she peered her head inside the room. Looking around, she saw him curled up in a ball, in the farthest corner from the door and windows. Ochako entered the room and then closed the door behind her. Walking over to him, she crouched down and sat beside him once more. She could feel his aura, it was becoming hollow. The air around them was giving a deathly chill, but it didn't bother her. His form was trembling, and his breathing was erratic. He was starting to hyperventilate. Izuku, she called him as she slowly grasped both of his hands. He flinched at the contact. She ignored it and slowly removed his hands, so she could see his face. Once done, she was met with scared green eyes. Izuku, breath. She cooed as she brought his head into an embrace and started running her fingers through his hair to comfort him. It seemed to be working as she felt him starting to slow down and his breathing was returning to normal. Ochako, he called weakly as his green eyes focused onto her chocolate brown eyes. Hey there. She said. You back in the real world? Izuku frowned at her words, knowing what she was talking about. If he was lost, it meant he was close to having another episode. It happened again, didn't it? Yes. Ochako answered as she continued playing with his hair. I can't believe he's still here, even after breaking my mother's heart, he's still roaming free like the villain he is, and yet, I haven't killed him. Izuku said as his hands started shaking in anger. I haven't gone out and killed him for everything he did. To society, to those people, my mother, and me. His eyes then started glow as his death alter ego took over. I should go and find him and send his rotten corpse straight to H. Izuku. Ochako called out to him, her voice tone filled with authority. Izuku glared with raging eyes into her own calm ones. She was accepting his challenge. He was about to grab her arm, but she was faster than them. She used her free hand to grip his forearm and stared into his eyes. Calm down. She ordered, using her own voice instead of having help from her own alter ego. She knew it would be enough. As if a flip switch in his head, Izuku immediately snapped out of his state and realization quickly hit him as soon as he saw his arm gripped by her hand. "I'm sorry." He apologized as he lifted his head from her lap. He was about to move away but Ochako placed a hand underneath his chin, turning his attention to her. "It's okay," she said softly before pulling him and herself up from the floor. She then noticed the circles around his eyes. "When was the last time he slept? You need some rest," she said as he shook his head negatively. "I'm okay." He objected softly but Ochako was having none of his stubbornness right now, his sleep is more important. "Deku," she called out to him with a stern tone. He flinched at her tone before frowning and turning his head away from her. "I don't want to deal with the nightmares again," he whispered to himself as he remembered his latest nightmare from before. "Do you want me to stay?" she asked him. No, that's okay. I'll be fine," he stuttered. "Deku," Ochako let out a sigh as she gazed at him with sad eyes. She knew that he wouldn't lean on her or anyone for help, he doesn't want to be a burden to anybody. "Not like it will stop her. You're resting," she said firmly before touching his cheek gently. Izuku looked confused before realizing what she was doing but it was already too late as the brunette's hand glowed with a pink aura before fading away. Few seconds later, he felt dizzy and tired as he started wobbling backwards. Ochako placed her fingers on his forehead as pink sparkles glittered above him. Suddenly he was floating in the air, weightless as the brunette slowly dragged his form over to the bed. Once his shadow was over the mattress, she draped the covers down before pressing her fingers together as pink sparkles glittered around her hands and he dropped onto the bed. Once he was down, she climbed into the bed with him and draped the covers over them both as she stared at Izuku. "Oh, Ochako, that wasn't fair." He tried to glare at her, but he didn't have the strength to do so. "I'm sorry Deku, but you need to sleep. You've been sleep deprived long enough," Ochako said, placing a hand on his cheek with a soft smile. "Go to sleep, I'll be right here with you." She then pressed her lips against his temple. Izuku tried to fight the urge to sleep but with Ochako taking his energy he couldn't fight back. His eyes felt droopy and within seconds he succumbed to sleep. Releasing her lips, the brunette gazed down at the boy in front of her. "He's so cute when he's sleeping," she thought lovingly as she carted her fingers through his hair giving comfort. She then frowned as she remembered him mentioning that he didn't want to go back to the nightmares. He sounded so scared as if he saw something traumatizing. It explains the dark rings around his eyes. The nightmare he's having, whatever it is, it's keeping him from getting sleep. Ochako sighed to herself as she wrapped an arm around the boy's back, pulling herself closer. "Sleep well, Deku," she said, pressing a kiss to his cheek. She leaned her forehead against his and let sleep take her. Minutes later, the door opened silently, revealing Eri and Katsuki. Eri was getting tired and she wanted to sleep on Katsuki's lap. The latter didn't mind, but he had somewhere to go and he needed to find Frog Face, so he went to set her with Deku and Round Face only to find the two asleep. "A freakin' course," he muttered to himself in slight irritation. Eri let go of his hand and made her way to the bed before climbing up onto it. She slipped twice trying to climb and the blonde was about to help her, but she succeeded on the third try. She crawled her tiny knees over their legs and positioned herself in between the lovebirds with her head underneath their chins. She let out a tiny little yawn before she dozed off with a peaceful look on her face. Closing the door gently, Katsuki left the three alone before heading out with a location in mind and an objective. Head to the cemetery and find Frog Face. Tsuyu was a normal girl who was straightforward with everything she said and done and was a laid-back individual. Now she's a girl with a new family, new lifestyle and a killer. The last one hurt her heart a lot. She was a killer because of Project Apocalypse, those scientists that experimented on her and her embodiment Pestilence, all just so they can take over Japan. It was pathetic. To think that they could control her after everything they did to her, it was pathetic. She swore to kill them as soon as she broke free of her chains. She thought she could take them on her own, but they caught her when she tried to escape. She failed time and time again because not only were they prepared for it but at the time she was consumed with hatred. The night they kidnapped her, her family was taken away. It broke her, she was forced to see them tortured. Their limbs chopped off one by one, injected with numerous poisons, the torture to her family was tearing her apart. No matter how many times she begged, no matter how many times she pleaded her captors to let them go, it was futile. In the end, she was forced to watch them all get slaughtered like animals. It shattered her soul, she cried her heart out relentlessly. Seeing them hurt because of her, she could never forgive herself for it. And now here she was in the cemetery in front of 4 graves, starting from her mother going down to her sister. Each gravestone holding different bouquets of flowers, she would get new ones every 2 weeks. Haika-san, Tu-san, Samdare-san, Satsuki-san. She started off before her eyes became glossy and tears ran down her cheeks before she could even speak. Soon her body was racked with guilt as she collapsed to her knees and gripped the grass beneath her. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," Tsuyu said solemnly as she remained on her knees, sobbing to herself as she relived the memories of her family before their last moments alive. She didn't know how long she was in the cemetery nor did she care, the only thing that mattered right now was her previously deceased frog family. She didn't know how long she was there, nor did she care, the only sounds going through her ears were the drops of water hitting the ground. It started raining sometime after she started crying but she paid no mind to the weather, she was still reeling from reliving the memories of her family's deaths. She stared at the ground with dead eyes before gazing up at the gravestones. "Gomenasai, family," she said as she walked from the graves and towards the path leading back to the entrance, leading to the main gate where she would meet up with Katsuki. Little did she know that someone from afar was watching them. Author's note. Okay, I was planning on releasing this Thursday but I was already done with the chapter. I was thinking about having a poll for which weapons the family should use when they fight but I'm still debating on whether or not I should do it. Answering reviews. Uchiha Naruto 247, Izuku, Ochako, Katsuki and Tsuyu are the same age as when the canon starts. J. Sua, that will be a surprise. Gibbo, thank you. Anyway, thank you for taking time to read this chapter. Read, review and see you next time. Hellraiser descending back to hell.